I spoke on Drive to David Davis, Tory MP for Halton, Price and Howden, former cabinet minister, and he told me how the outcome of the case impacted the UK's reputation internationally. What is your view then on how Shamima Begum should be treated? Would you like to see her, I suggest you clearly do, brought back to this country? And if so, should she be put on trial in this country?
Well, that's perfectly proper. I mean, that is perfectly proper. If she's brought back, then the prosecution authorities, who hopefully are independent of politics in this country, should look at her, should look at the case in detail. There's no shortage of information about it now after all these years, and say, okay, has she committed a crime? If they think there's a chance she's committed a crime, they should try her. But the outcome of that trial will be, let's say she gets found guilty, year, 2 years in prison. What she faces at the moment is basically a perpetuity in a prison camp, living in tents in snow, or the government's argument, well, you've got another country to go to. You were born in Bangladesh. You've lived in Britain all your life, but you were born in Bangladesh. Bangladesh have said, if she comes back here, we'll execute her. Full stop. End of story. Now, that's not a fair outcome either. We've had lots of people in this country who have been arrested and charged with terrorism-related crimes. I'm not talking about the actual killers themselves, but people who've been associated with the organisations, and they get sent to prison. They're put through rehabilitation mechanisms while they're there, and the vast majority of them go on to normal lives thereafter. It's become a sort of deviation in their life that they've recovered from. That's the option that should be available to Shamima Begum. We're not making ourselves look great in the international. In the international sphere. I was visited directly by a Deputy Secretary of State from the United States, very senior, like a Deputy Foreign Secretary, specifically to ask me if I could use any pressure I had on the government to get her returned and to get there are about 20 in her position, I think, to get her returned. Because they think it's dangerous. They think what our policy is dangerous. And if anybody is more advanced in this area than we are, it's the Americans. They know more about what's going on, and they've got more experience, more skill in it.
So David Davis there, obviously feeling really strongly about this. Paul, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the most interesting thing that's come out in the last 24 hours is the court documents which show that MI5 had a damning assessment of Begum's TV and radio and magazine blitz, a series of interviews she did trying to push her case. And MI5 said they were clearly self-serving attempts to change her image. Now, you don't hear that kind of intel often made public, and there was a clear reason for it. They simply didn't believe her, and I think actually that's really, really powerful for the government. It helps their case massively, because if you've got the experts saying, look, come on, this is clearly an attempt to pull the wool over people's eyes, that she is this great heroine, this great wronged victim, then you don't believe it. And I thought that was quite powerful.
What do you think, Lucy?
I think it's really problematic to have stripped her of her citizenship and leaving her in essentially the badlands of northern Syria in a camp. And not just her, but other kind of ISIS brides and ISIS fighters that have come from the UK. They clearly do not have the institutions, the infrastructure, frankly, the security around these people. And it's a sort of territory which, it's not unimaginable. It could be taken over by kind of terror groups in future. I think when you then consider the fact that she was 15 when she travelled from the UK to Syria, a child, that just adds to the grievousness of what the UK government has done. I think it is, it does set a precedent. The UK, if a country like the UK, with our reputation for kind of law and order and kind of probity on the international stage, acts like this, I think it will encourage others to sort of strip unwanted or problematic citizens of their citizenship or their passports. So I think it is a really sort of difficult thing for the UK government to have done.
Do her motives weigh in the balance at all for you. Now, the court today said it was credible to suppose that she'd been trafficked out there, and clearly she'd had help from those inside and around ISIS to get to where she was going, and she wasn't forced to go. She decided she wanted to go. She kind of been in entire ignorance of what IS were and what they were doing. Now, against that, she's 15 years old, and you have to consider how capable is a 15-year-old of making a reasoned judgment that a court can weigh in the balance. But a lot of people listening to this out there will say, look, she joined IS, this murderous, monstrous organisation. She was a part of it, a willing and perfectly cooperative part of it, and that should count. In a word, Paul.
Yeah, I think most people would probably be right there as well. It's not as if she's being groomed like those poor girls in Rochdale or Rotherham. You know, she was groomed for terrorism, and ultimately you've got to. When she was even over 18, she's didn't show much remorse at the age of 18 onwards. So when she was an adult.
Well, I'm John Pienaar, and if you found that interesting, we are here each day, Monday to Thursday, 5 o'clock till 7 o'clock on Drive, and from 7 till 8, Pienaar and Friends, where we discuss the big stories of the day each day on Times Radio.